The comments and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not reflect those of their employers, friends, families, or casual acquaintances.
Hello, and welcome to SwimTalk on A2B Radio. With us, Dana Abbott and Bob Button, as we dive into the exciting world of competitive swimming with coach and athlete interviews, conversations with interesting and significant people in our sport, and commentary that is better than good. It's adequate. This episode starts right after this. Our guest on this episode of SwimTalk A2B is retired coach Mike Stott, whose teams at the Collegiate School in Richmond, Virginia, won 9 state high school championships. Mike is a longtime member of NISCA, the National Interscholastic Swimming Coaches Association, and is an ASCA Level 5 coach. He received NISCA's Outstanding Service Award in 2017 and is one of Swimming World Magazine's most popular contributors. Well, Mike Stott, welcome to SwimTalk A2B. Bob is down in his beautiful city of Bay City. And how are you doing today, Bob?
Never better. Glad to be back. We've been on hiatus for almost a year, and it's good to get the podcast going again, and we're thrilled to have Mike with us.
Pleasure to be here, gentlemen. I feel like I'm with the experts in the aquatic world, and I'm happy to share some thoughts with you. So fire away.
Tell us a little bit about your personal swimming background, how you got into coaching, if you got into it from college swimming, just a little brief bio, if you would.
My mother enrolled me in a Learn to Swim class at New Trier Township High School when I was 8. And I was telling someone the other day that the funny thing about that was there was boys' classes and girls' classes, and the guys all swam naked.
That's during Dave Robertson's time, wasn't it?
It was very much during Dave Robertson's time. And from there, my best friend in high school was part of those famed New Trier teams, late 50s and 60s. And he talked me into becoming a manager on the team in 1960, which I continued to do. And that particular year, if I'd known how large the swim program was at New Trier, I'd have gone out for the varsity C team or the B team. I wouldn't have been one of the 11 high school All-Americans we had my senior year, which was 1961. But that team set 10 national high school records that year. Two athletes went on to make the Tokyo Olympic team. And one, Fred Schmidt, was the bronze medalist in the 200 butterfly. And he was the butterflyer on the 4x100 medley relay that set a world record. Fred ended up going to Indiana. Many of the other kids on that team went to Yale. But Fred, between his senior year graduation at New Trier and freshman year at Indiana, set the world record in the 100-meter butterfly. So I remained attached to New Trier swimming in all its forms, at least spiritually, from 1961 to present day.
Hey, Mike, did you swim in college?
I did not. Here's the interesting thing. I went to a gym class. I had at the College of Worcester in Worcester, Ohio. We required first 2 years to take gym classes. And one of the early units was swimming. And my instructor said, you need to go out for the swim team. And he was pretty adamant about that. But it was at a time when I was a very, very good intramural football player. And I knew I would have a better time playing intramural football than I did swimming. So I never did that. I ended up life-saving and, WSI and all that. But one thing I did do was I became the manager of the college swim team. I remember we went to Denison when they first opened their pool, and I also wrote for the town newspaper and typing a story about the meet on the bus going from Granville to Worcester. And I kept in touch with swimming there. And I also announced the swim meets. And the thing about the College of Worcester swim team was it was a decent team, but the pool was the smallest one still used for intercollegiate competition, 16 and 2/3 yards. And we would swim Kenyon every other year. And so Kenyon would come in and just rewrite the pool records every other year. And one day, the meet official lost count of the number of laps on the 200-yard butterfly. So we ended up setting the pool record in the 233 and 1/3 yard breaststroke. Anyway, and so college swimming, no, I was a manager. I got into competitive swimming myself as a master swimmer when I was 36 years old. I had back surgery when I was 27. And for about 8 years, I just did lap swimming as kind of a therapy. And one day, a guy I had been swimming with who swam at Rutgers said, you're pretty good. We're going to a Masters meet. It was the national championship up in Catonsville, Maryland. And he said, we're going to have a good time. A bunch of us are going. And so I signed up for the meet. And about 6 days before the meet, my buddy from Rutgers said, I asked him, I said, I haven't heard anything about this meet. What's the deal here? And he said, we're not going. And I thought, well, I am. And I went up there, and the short version is, and the only event that I could conceivably be competitive in was the 1650. And the pool was a 6-lane, 25-yard pool, but the warm-up and warm-down, they took 1 lane for warm-up and warm-down. So you only had 5 competitive lanes at the time. And I finished 3rd in my age group. And after that, one guy who had been counseling me on how to swim the race, I asked him, I said, well, this is kind of fun. Is there anything else? And he said, well, there's this 2-mile swim up in Charlottesville, and you might want to check that out. And I went up there, and I finished 3rd in my age group in the national championship in that. And that was the start of my swimming career.
Excellent.
By this time, I joined a rec association in my neighborhood, and one of the guys swimming there had been the 100-meter backstroke, 100-yard backstroke championship for the University of Virginia, and he was their first NC2A qualifier in swimming. And we became good friends, and I did a lot of workouts with him. He taught me about interval training, and then my kids got involved in summer league swimming, and I was made the club official and representative to the league, and got involved in summer league swimming, and I remain so to this day. So I became vice president of swimming. I became vice president of awards. I became president of the league. They named a scholarship after me in 1996, and that continues to this day.
Well, that's cool.
The preceding segment was brought to you courtesy of the Secretarial Pool at Swimming World Magazine.
Hey, Mike, I got a couple of totally unrelated questions that came to me just while you were talking about these things. One, while you were in college doing a little writing about swimming, I suppose that helped with what we're about to talk about, getting publicity for our swim programs. So I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. But on a more personal note, I've had 3 back surgeries, and I have not done any Masters pool events since, but I still enjoy doing open water events. Do you find that the pool events are tough on your back? Have you had any trouble with your back since the surgery on the pool events? How's that working out for you?
I had 0 issues with my back swimming in pools. My surgeon and the guy who did the surgery had been an All-American guard at Cornell, and one of my other physicians was the team physician for the New York Mets. And they knew I had an active lifestyle, and they the only thing they said, we don't want you to do after the surgery is weightlifting and skydiving. Said, but you probably don't want to run much anymore. And 3 times I tried to go back to competitive running, and I after three weeks, all my old issues came back. So what I learned about pool swimming, which I did avidly for about 5 years, and really longer than that, was that I could not be competitive in sprint events. And I migrated to open water stuff and had a much better track record competitive.
Yeah, I figured for me, triathlons were going to be out because of the running, but the open water was still wide open for me. And like you say, something where I'm going to be hitting walls hard in sprints are going to be a no. Okay, hey, thanks.
Mike, when you and I talked on the phone the other day, I related to you how difficult it is in some metropolitan areas to get coverage for high school swimming. The Dallas Morning News does a fantastic job covering high school swimming, yet, as I mentioned, here in Houston, we might get one mention a year, and it's probably after the state meet or somebody does something fantastic at the state meet. Little town where I live has got its own local newspaper, but we have 9 high schools. Bob occasionally gets some good articles and press down in his city, but there's only the one high school. So we're going to be asking you questions about how to get more publicity, but have you noticed different areas of the country put more emphasis on the pro and college sports more than the high schools, or areas that give the high schools a little bit better coverage?
Best high school swimming coverage in a newspaper I ever saw was in the Orlando Sun-Sentinel. And I was down at Fort Lauderdale and got a copy of the paper. And I noticed that they gave on a regular basis swim results, all results from every event, from many different teams, just on a regular basis down there. And I thought, well, this is terrific. But I think Florida has a more sensitivity to that, to swimming. And my experience has been that the problem with getting high school swimming coverage or swimming coverage of any kind has to do with the fact that the people writing it have not been brought up in that environment. So they either have not been swimmers as youngsters, or they have not been exposed to it in any meaningful way. And there is such emphasis on football and basketball that swimming is an afterthought. Now, I've developed my own system of conquering that, but we don't get swimming coverage on a regular basis. Townley Haas is from Richmond, and I can tell you that the only times he would get coverage was if he came home from the Olympics, and then there would be a nice feature, or if he made the Olympic team, he got a nice feature. But he did well at national meets, and so there'd be 4 or 5 lines on him there. And the rest, there wasn't any swimming coverage at all, unless I got involved in high school swimming, and maybe we're going to talk about that later. And there was a way to beat the system there. But we've had the pro tier meet has just finished, and there were 4 lines in the paper on Saturday morning after Katie Ledecky swam. And that was about it. All the rest was features on college basketball, where the latest Virginia Tech athletes were going for football, and the other major college teams. They did features that were evergreen in nature on these things. And the other thing is, with advertising revenues down so much on daily newspapers, they don't have the advertising to support more copy, and anything that they can shovel into just brief summaries along with NBA standings or National Hockey League standings or PGA golf or whatever, it gets brushed into that, if there's any high school swimming at all.
Speaking for my area, the next bigger town over from Bay City is Victoria. And we've got a sports writer over there, sports editor, Mike Foreman, who was a swimmer in high school and knows swimming and is great about it. And something he told me a long time ago was, please, when you send me results, send them from high tech with the AP version. And it goes so great for him into the paper. And I think that's something that would help a lot of our high school and club coaches if they would do that. It's a real easy checkbox to use in high tech when we're sending a result out. I think that's makes it a lot easier for these folks to put it into the paper. And it's just something maybe when we're training some of the folks at some of these clinics on software use, maybe that would be an easy thing to show them to help them get publicity, because these sports writers, A, like you said, they don't know swimming, but B, they're not going to take the time to type in all these results if you're just sending them in Word or some other format. But if you send them in the right format, that they can just fire it into their articles or into their paper, or even if it's going to be online, I think that's going to help them, don't you think?
Well, to pick up on that, I have a very good friend who was a longtime track coach at the Collegiate School where I coached, and he has written. He was employer of the Richmond newspapers back in the 70s, and he writes for them on a very regular basis, prep sports on a weekend, and he always wanted the track results included. And what he did was he found out what format the paper wanted that he could use to submit the results, so that a reporter or whomever would not have to do any of this transference of data that you're talking about.
Right.
And that's been his ticket to getting track news in. I have not inquired of the Richmond newspapers if there is a particular format for swimming that they want, whether it's from a high-tech format or something else. I know what I've used. The high-tech stuff that I have sent in for state meets or for league meets seems to work for them. But that's a very cogent point, because if it requires work, probably not going to get done.
You're right.
I developed my own system for getting swimming coverage in the papers. One thing that helped me was that I did media relations for a living, and I've got several things that have always worked for me. Bob, is your school interested in coverage? Some schools and ADs could care less if it's coverage for something other than basketball or football.
Oh, I think we're interested in sports across the board getting coverage. I think Bay City it's when I used to work up in Mansfield, they had a saying that the sports are kind of the front porch for your school, and I feel that way here in Bay City. That's also the feeling. It's kind of the gateway into your school. I think Bay City's the same way. A lot of schools look at it that way. I think we have a real great athletic director who welcomes coverage for all our sports. And in Texas, we have a Lone Star Cup that is important to a lot of schools. The UIL awards an all sports type trophy to schools who excel in everything. So it is important to get coverage for all your sports.
Well, I had an AD that was interested in like coverage for the school, whatever the sport was. She happened to be a field hockey coach, a very successful one. But the school were not willing to put the resources behind the effort to get it out there. So unless there was an exceptional athlete or the teams had a terrific year, we probably didn't get it. Now, we benefited from one thing. There was a fellow who was all Metro swim, all Metro football and basketball player for 2 years named Russell Wilson. And he was always good for something. You know, he did well at NC State. He did well at Wisconsin, and winning a Super Bowl.
Right, as a pro.
Yeah, it didn't hurt either. But I realized that for my swim team, if I wanted to get coverage, I needed to do several things. One was I would gather facts for the paper. I'd look for things that were unusual. 2 counties in our area about 4 years ago sanctioned the VHSL, which is the high school organizing body, sanctioned high school swimming in 2 of our major counties here. It hadn't been that before. So that was worth something. It kind of legitimized the sport in the eyes of the media and merited coverage. I would look for things that were timely, whether it be a rivalry, a conference, or state meet coming up or whatever. If it was different, we got some coverage on our high school pool because it happened to be the 2008 Olympic trials pool. One time, more than once, but we had a celebrity come to town, a swimming celebrity, and I arranged for interviews and a columnist to talk to this girl. And this was in January 2013. And that girl happened to be Katie Ledecky, who had just come off of, her London gold medal. So sometimes if you have a really good local athlete, I had 3 kids. One was a 3-time national junior team member. He was a captain his senior year. He went to Auburn and was a 7-time NC2A All-American. Another one was a valedictorian and was a swimmer of the year in Richmond. And he went to Stanford and won 7 NC2A titles. And the last was a girl who was a 9-time All-American and member of the national team. And those kids performed so well that I got to the point where the reporters would actually ask about those kids and, what's new with them. And I was able to accommodate them.
Well, that's great. So you maintain a connection with those kids through email, social media. Do you keep a phone number so you can text back and forth and keep that contact current?
Correct. Yep. And they were happy to do it. And of course, their parents were delighted that the kids were getting the coverage. What I learned was initially when I started out in media relations, it was newspaper, radio, and TV. Well, forget radio these days, right? Unless it's a podcast or something of that nature. One time, I did this more than once, but here's an interesting story. In looking for something unusual, I was heavily involved in my summer league team. We had a meet end of June in like 1990, and it was beastly hot. It had been in the 90s for 3 or 4 days, and the pool had gotten up to 90 degrees in water temperature. And I thought, well, I called an ice company. I said, will you come in and dump ice in our pool? We need to get it down. And he said, oh yeah, we'll come out about 2:00 and dump it in. I got 2 TV stations to come out, send reporters and come out covering the dumping of the ice in the pool. And I remember these reporters just sweating like dogs waiting for this ice company. The meet warm-up started at 6:00, and the lifeguards are in, I kid you not, are in the pool pushing these blocks of ice around to get the damn things to melt. And so we take the temperature of the pool when the ice is melted. It's dropped from 90 to 89 degrees. So, well, how much good did that do? The next morning, I get a call from a member of our club and said, Mike, if you ever decide to do that again, call me because I'll donate the ice. Next year, we're swimming the same opponent, another heat wave. He sends 40,000 pounds of ice. It's 10:00. They dump that all in, and it drops the temperature 4 degrees. again, we had the TV coverage. And what we got out of that was not just a swimming story, but we got a weather story. And it led to evening news because it was a nice offbeat thing on the weather.
That is fantastic.
Yeah. You had to work at it. But, I like doing that kind of stuff. And I had good relationships with the stations, but that I had built them up over time. And it wasn't just on stuff I was interested in. I would give them tips about other things. And I became a local expert, particularly for the newspapers, with anything to do with swimming. And I would write press releases for them on upcoming state meets or the conference meet. And if you're willing to do that, you would be surprised when the story appears how much those words look terribly familiar to you. Like maybe those were the words you wrote.
Yeah. Okay. That reminds me of something we used to do way back. I can't remember when we last did it, but we had certificates. Our state high school association, TISCA, used to have certificates that we could award to our local media. It was a TISCA Media Award, and I know I gave them out to for several years, and it was kind of neat. We would put it in a frame and send it to our local paper, and I know I gave them to Mike Foreman because he gave us great coverage over in Victoria paper.
Okay.
We don't do that anymore, but I wonder if we shouldn't bring that back, because when we get good coverage, we should recognize those folks for giving us good coverage in our sport, because sometimes it's few and far between the people that care enough to write a good story, or like you said, put us on television and maybe put us on their social media.
Well, one of the things I've done is I've made a conscious effort to find out who the beat writer is. And for a while, papers didn't have beat writer to swimming. And I remember we got a new managing sports editor to come in town from Alabama. And I tried for 3 weeks to get an appointment with him. And he finally said, I'm awfully busy. I said, here's what I'll do. What kind of sandwich do you want from Jimmy John's? And he told me. So I got him a sandwich, and I went down and I met with him in his office. And after that meeting, he assigned me a beat writer. And so what I would do is I end up taking the guy to lunch probably a couple times a year. I would be a frequent caller on his phone or text or whatever. And, at the end of the season, you're thinking, well, there's no swimming or whatever. So how can we get some coverage? Well, I learned anything NISCA related was a gold mine. PowerPoint National Dual Meet rankings, swim and dive All-Americans.
Academic, yeah.
Anyone in their coverage area, not just my athletes, academic All-Americans, scholar team results. My last year, my girls had a 3.869 team GPA, college commitments. They gladly took that stuff and wrote it. Again, no, they printed it. I wrote it all. But I still take these guys to lunch. It's become a good social relationship as well. And another thing I've done for them is we have an all-metro swim and dive team, the top 2 athletes in each competitive event. For the last 16 years, Mike Stott has produced that list. They trust me, and they like it because it's different from football and basketball, and their reporters don't have to do it.
So how are you doing that? Are you taking all the times from the metro area and compiling them into a list for every event?
No, what I do is I start with the public and the independent school state meets. And I look for what I think will be good times. And then what I do is go to the USA Swimming database. They publish the top 100 times in each stroke. And so what I do is put in I key 14 to 18-year-olds in there so I can narrow my search. And now some 18-year-olds are college kids, right? So you just throw them out immediately. And I look for anyone who has a team affiliation in my distribution area here. And so once I get that and get that what I think is cleaned up. And I'll also go to USA Swimming teams' personal databases. Some teams will do top times for the season in there. And I'll check that off, cross-check it with with the USA Swimming and my own personal database at this point. And then I send it out to the head coaches on each of we've got about 7 club teams in the Richmond area, and have them check it. And usually what I send them is about 95% accurate. Sometimes there's somebody who's slipped through the crack, and so I get that cleaned up. I did it just last week, and there's an ISCA meeting, down in Orlando right now, and I've gone back and checked the results from that meet, and there's 2 changes based on that meet. But what I'll have is something that's finished by Tuesday probably, and I'll send it out one last time to coaches, get their checks on it, and then send it to the newspaper. And they've had an all-metro team probably since late 1990s.
I think one of the things you said that was of real interest to me was that you wrote everything. You took it to the newspaper, and our little local newspaper may not be a whole lot different than the one where Bob lives, but the sports editor is also the only sports writer for that newspaper. And while there is one high school and a few other area high schools where Bob is, there are 9 high schools just in our district. And then how many sports do you have for each school? These sports writers cannot go around and cover everything. And if the coaches don't make and take the time to prepare something in a form that they can use and understand, we're beating a dead horse. We can complain all we want, but if we don't give them something, that they can actually use in a usable form, we're not going to get covered.
Correct. And that's why those personal relationships can help tip the scales for you.
Yeah. I think in the days before the software, I used to have a little form, a form letter that I would fill in the blanks form and drop it in the mail slot. And I would also add some quotes at the end. And, it was almost like a little press release type thing. And they would just go with it. And,
right.
That's, and now I'm kind of doing almost the same thing, but via email. There's, whether it's club or high school. And that's something I wanted to ask you about, Coach. Do you have any suggestions? We've got people that'll listen to this podcast. I mean, there's at least 5 that'll listen to this, and some of them will be involved in summer league only. Some of them will be a year-round club. Some might be high school, and there might be one collegiate coach. Is there anything that relates to all of those? Do you have any suggestions that might relate to just 1 or 2 of those programs that you could suggest that's going to help us?
I always look for something unusual. We're in a people business, swimming. I remember one year we had a pretty competitive meet coming up. The coach of a team called Avalon was the college coach for Virginia Commonwealth University. The coach of his name was Ron Suchia. The coach for my program, Southampton Recreation Association, was an NC2A All-American who happened to be the Avalon coach's son. I thought that this rivalry and the familial relationship might make a nice feature, so I pitched that to one of the sports writers, and I did it enough in advance so they could send a photographer out and they could do their homework on it, and it got quite a bit of feature coverage. We do so much electronically these days. I think just see if you can find somebody who is interested in swimming, or maybe your editor will say, look, can you add swimming to some prep writers beat? We have a thing called Prep Notes, which is a kind of a catch-all column on prep sports, high school stuff mainly. And every now and then I'll send stuff in there, and it doesn't have to be a feature, but it can just be something you can send in an email, and they do it twice a week. So, even if it's only a mention, it's like you keep feeding the beast that way, and they begin to recognize you as a source, and they say, whoa, there is interest in swimming. And Richmond is a good swimming community. So there are parents and interested in that. And we have good athletes here to merit some of that.
Right. Is there a particular time of year where maybe it's not a particular time of year for swimming to be going on, but maybe everything else is kind of at a lull where maybe you can sneak in a swim related thing?
Well, look, what happens in July? The NISCA All-American rankings come out, right? And all that stuff. So that seemed like a good time to me, promote local athletes. And the beauty of that was it wasn't just my team. I would go through the 100 names on each of those event lists, and I could pick out 7 or 8 or 9 names for kids from Richmond area schools, and write a release on NISCA results and all those things that I talked about, the PowerPoint rankings, the All-Americans, the academic All-Americans, the scholar team stuff. And the other thing is college commitments. That's any time of year, right?
Right.
The sports editors are used to talking about football and basketball and even baseball commitments. They'll take your swimming stuff. We have girls that are going to Florida next year, or going to South Carolina, going to a variety of places. And that's worthy of something, even if it's only 5 sentences.
Sure is. This is a little bit off that, but years ago, I thought I had an idea, thought it was a good idea, but it never took off. We were going to try to get our high school coaches to do a poll, kind of a voting poll, kind of like CSCAA does as we went through the year, and do that as a little release to the newspapers around the state and say, hey, because other sports in Texas do this. There's even a tennis poll that comes out in the paper once in a while. I hope tennis people don't get mad at me for using that as an even tennis. But, baseball does it, soccer does it. And I thought, well, why doesn't swimming do it? We could vote on it and say who are the teams we think are the top teams in the state in each classification. And it never took off. I could not get coaches to participate in it, and it just flopped. What do other states do to get a little bit of publicity throughout the season? And because I think newspapers would print something like that.
I agree. I can tell you in Richmond, every week during the football season, they list the local rankings of high school football teams, 1 through 10. They do the same for field hockey. And then also they have the state rankings that the Virginia High School League puts out. I'm trying to think what other sports they do. Lacrosse, they do it for. They do not do it for swimming, but I bet they would if someone just broached the idea to them. They do it for volleyball. Volleyball is huge here. They do it for tennis. So I think your idea has a lot of merit.
So is it a coach's poll for those sports, or is it a sports writer's poll? I would think that sports writers probably are too busy to bother paying attention. I figured it would be coaches.
They have a committee that does it, made up of about 5 or 6 coaches and a couple reporters who do the research, or they're the guys who decide what the rankings are.
Okay.
And that works. You're right. That's popular.
Maybe we can revive that idea. Maybe somebody that's better at selling it than I am.
When's the last time you talked on the phone or went down and met a reporter?
Oh, talked to Jimmy Galvan recently because they've closed our pool. That was a front page above the fold article twice in a row.
Well, why don't you have a conversation with him? And maybe he's not the guy, but maybe he can push you. Have you had the conversation? You probably have but how can get a little more swimming coverage in the paper?
Yeah, well, we do pretty well. They even put a little blurb in the Sentinel here, another local paper, about our junior high kid breaking his IM record. So I really don't have any complaints, only praise for our local papers. I guess I'll float that idea again, because I haven't talked to anybody about that poll for a long time. But maybe we can bring that back now that we're bringing a third classification to Texas. There's going to be 6A, 5A, and 4A next year.
Oh, that's something new, and that gives the reporter an excuse to do it. If his editor says, "Why are we doing this?" the reporter can answer, "Well, there's a new setup here."
There you go.
I one thing I always liked, I think of Linda Baines. Who was Lyndon Johnson's wife? Was that Linda Baines?
Lady Bird.
She was once asked why she liked libraries, and her answer was really simple. She said she liked the library's open access because the only entrance requirement was interest. It's the same for media relations, I'm convinced. Yes, it'll take some work, but if it's important to you or your school or their parents, I think a little persistence can carry you a long way.
Dana, I'm pretty much dominating this, and I know you got some stuff. I've got another question later on, but I hate doing too much here.
No, I think you're doing a great job, because you're the one who's been doing most of the legwork about trying to connect with newspapers and get publicity for your team. And I've just been making notes while you guys are talking. You're running a clinic on me here.
Well, I'll throw one more thing. I had one more thing for you, Coach. The poster. Okay, this is pretty specific, because we'd love to do a poster, and we thought about doing a poster here at our school. But the reason we haven't done one is our school already does a sort of all sports poster that includes several teams that are on this with their pictures, their team picture, and their schedule. And we don't get any money for it out of our poster. The advertisers that put their logos on there, their ads at the bottom of the poster and put them around school and stuff. And I'm worried, because swim programs are often looked at as the outsiders in swim, athletic departments rather. If we tried to do our own poster, wouldn't that make us appear even more like the outsiders? How would I approach my AD and say, hey, we want to do our own poster with just our swimmers and our schedule, and we want to sell it?
I'll tell you, there's two people you ought to talk to. Todd Larkin at St. X down in Kentucky has a marketing machine that he institutes at the start of every year. What he not only does a poster, he does a kind of a yearbook, and he benefits from the fact that one of his biggest supporters has an ad agency and can do a lot of high-end graphics for him. But they get all kinds of support from the community and advertisers in terms of posters and stuff that they want to do and promote the swim team in a huge way. And he is full of ideas about how to do it. He is terrific. And another guy is Ron Blanc from Santa Margarita, California.
Okay.
He puts out an 82-page media guide every year for his team, and it's full color, got more information than the Encyclopedia Britannica. It's a tremendous thing that he does for his program.
That's really cool. I remember in the days, even when I was swimming, when you would show up for a dual meet and there would be a little small, maybe it was just a real tiny, but it would have a little bit of a roster for each team, and maybe a little way of keeping score, the format, the order of events. I just think we've gotten away from that. I know that was at least something kind of neat. We don't do anything like that now.
Do you do, or did you do heat sheets at any time?
Yeah, for our relay meet, things like that. We got to start getting back into that.
You didn't do them for dual meets?
For us to even have to even know that we're able to have a dual meet because of our pool situation has been a struggle. If we get that straightened out now, we can actually go back to being a real host.
And I think the other thing is Meet Mobile has taken, sort of taken over the heat sheet business. But
right.
We always, before Meet Mobile became really prominent, I always did a heat sheet for my team. It included the top times, top 3 times in each stroke in the history of the program, to give parents an idea of how the athletes of the present day were measured up to those in the past. And that was well liked. I treasured that stuff like gold. And no one has a better history of the collegiate swim program than I do. It's far better than anything that's at the school. I'm happy to turn it over when I get asked, but in the meantime, people are happy just to come to me.
Yeah, I think that's probably something that, and I don't think Bay City's unique. I bet you there's quite a few programs around the country that the athletic department should have a copy of everything, and there should be backups at a couple of other places. It just really disgusted me when I came back and found out that, because the school doesn't own the pool and didn't own the office, and when a renovation is done and when there's 2 or 3 coaching changes, nobody knows where anything is.
Right.
That just really bugs the crap out of me still.
I hate to see, I was a history major, so I sort of like anything that's old, but I can identify with your frustration.
Yeah, I may next year with one of my freshmen, I may pick somebody out that I think is going to be on the team for 4 years and say, you're our team historian, get started, dig all this stuff back up. And it might mean that you're going to go over to the newspaper a couple times a month and start researching through microfilm.
And you're going to find out it's not your best swimmer, but somebody who has a passion for the sport and who wants to help you.
There you go.
There's something in politics called the third rail, which in subways is where you get electrocuted if you touch that third rail, the one the wheels don't run on. I was just thinking, because of its timeliness and probably upcoming discussion on a national level more, is the issue we had at the women's NCAAs with the swimmer from the University of Pennsylvania. I'm wondering if we're going to see these kinds of issues develop in high school sports, because that's a much younger age to be taking that kind of position.
Well, I can tell you transgender issues regarding academic and school life is rife in Virginia, with lawsuits left, right, and center. My personal issue, I think I mentioned to you, I've been approached 3 times by people who have zero background in swimming, asking me about the Leah Thomas situation and what my stance was. And simply, I believe you compete as you're biologically born. And I don't think that the NC2A has the stones to follow or that way of thinking.
Yeah, we had a law passed in Texas last year that basically said that our Texas public schools require an athlete to compete under the gender they were listed as on their birth certificate. I'm just wondering, how long is it going to be until we get a 6'8" or 6'9" male basketball player that weighs 250 pounds decide that they want to transition to female and play on a basketball team? It's quite a briar patch. I don't know what's going to happen. All I know is that there were some girls, in my opinion, that were cheated out of their rightful places, especially in the 500 free.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No question about it.
CSCAA, I think, just bumped up the 9th and 17th place to All-American. Yeah.
Yeah, they did. I saw that.
Bumped them up, those girls, to award them their All-American that they earned.
Yes, they absolutely did. But then you go and look at the 3 events that Thomas was in, and there's 3 girls or 3 event entries that didn't get to go to NC2As because they were bumped out of the last place.
Well, you can back up to the Ivy League and say there are gals that didn't final or didn't score as high as they would have. You can back up all the way to the team, the Penn girls, and say there's a girl that didn't make the conference team. There's a girl that didn't get on a relay. You can go way back and say there are girls that were denied the opportunity. And isn't that what Title IX is about, is female opportunity? I've knocked Title IX for decades for being applied in incorrect ways. Title IX should be applied here because Title IX is about equal opportunity. And those gals were denied their opportunities. And I believe that those gals should be bringing lawsuits against everybody that was involved in denying them opportunities.
I was looking just now for the correct wording, but I'll paraphrase it because I think it leads to something that can be very confusing. It says, no person in the United States shall be denied opportunity based on sex, ethnicity, race, something along those lines. And then we come to the real muddy area of sex versus gender and female versus woman in the Thomas case. And it's not real clear. One side says she's a woman. Another side says, well, you can call her a woman, but she's not female. So are we going to get into some murky areas where we are arguing semantics, and are we going to have to come up with more precise, specific definitions in U.S. code about sex, gender, and in other areas, female and woman? I mean,
it's not as simple as ABC. It's as simple as XY.
XY, indeed.
Right. If you go to XY, that's all you need to know.
We got case closed there on SwimTalk A2B.
This is going to be one of our longer podcasts. And who was it that told us that a podcast really shouldn't be longer than about 20 minutes? That's one of the rules that we have blatantly and flagrantly ignored.
We can edit it down to 2 or 3 episodes worth, you know?
Well, this has been real interesting. I think the biggest thing is getting publicity for your team. There's a lot of good discussion I've listened to today, and I want to thank you for taking part in it, because I don't know how many of our 24 podcast followers know this, but Mike writes 4 articles a month for Swimming World magazine, plus talks to me and writes articles for the NISCA Journal, and prolific output of literary talent. And I look forward to every issue of Swimming World. I wonder how many articles old Stott's going to have in this magazine.
Well, usually 4.
Yeah, well, the one you just had, the one in the Swimming World that just came out, it was a part 2 about dealing with problematic teammates. And I thought that was really good. And I also like the one about doing things right. And you're including some of the, with the exception of yours truly, you're including a lot of the absolute best coaches in the country and getting some great insights and thoughts to share with the readership of Swimming World. And I just want to thank you for being so prolific and also hitting on topics and issues that I think are very important.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, gentlemen. And if there are any golfers in the group listening, they can feel free to pick up a copy of Too Much Loft, which is a coming-of-age novel that I wrote and was published last spring. So,
give us that title again, Mike.
Too Much Loft.
Hey, Coach Stott, before we go, are there any other ways on social media that people can follow you? Any other publications or anything that they can look for?
Are you on the Twitter?
I don't I don't tweet. I'm on Facebook, but I'm not publishing. I'm more a voyeur with Facebook than other things. But if people are welcome to send me an email anytime to discuss various swimming things, and I would respond quickly to that. And that's
Great.
Michael J. Stott at Comcast.net.
Excellent.
We will include all of these connections to you and also push your book for you at the extra details on the YouTube and the podcast.
Okay. And I will send you the names of the contact information for Todd Larkin and Ron Blanc.
That would be terrific. Mike, thanks again for joining us this afternoon, and we will expect you back sometime in the next 6 months.
Well, thank you for having me, gentlemen, and I'll look forward to speaking to you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Great.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, Mike.
Take care.
We've been talking with author and former head swim coach at the Collegiate School in Richmond, Virginia, Mike Stott. His new book, Too Much Loft, an entertaining look into country club golf life, has been described as a fun and frolicking read. Too Much Loft by Michael J. Stott is available on Amazon and in fine bookstores everywhere. If you'd like to get in touch with Mike Stott, check the program notes for his email address. He promises to write back. Join us again for another better than good episode of Swim Talk on A2B Radio. We'll see you next time.